Hi, my name is Rama, Dr. Frederick Lenz, and I'm going to talk to you why you want to succeed in school. Now, I know everybody says that you should succeed in school, and they're right, but sometimes for the wrong reasons. So I want to give you my opinion on the subject. Now, I think in order for my opinion to matter to you, you have to know a little bit about me and what I've gone through. Well, I'm a music producer in Los Angeles. I live in Malibu. I have a great lifestyle. I also live in New York, where I develop software. I develop educational software packages, software for businesses, all kinds of software. I teach martial arts. I teach people how to defend themselves. And I travel all over the world. I can get on a plane whenever I want to and just take out my American Express card and go. I have a very open schedule. I do music for television shows, for commercials. If it's music, I do it. I love it. In other words, I have a lot of interesting choices that most people don't have that I can make every day. I can choose, for instance, to work on a certain project or not to. I can do a rock video. I'm in a lot of rock videos, actually. I used to do some dancing on the stage. I have a lot of different talents that I've developed. But I also have a PhD, and I used to teach in a university. I've done a lot of things with my life, and I'm, I guess, what you would call very successful on a material level, and I'm happy. I mean, to tell you the truth, I'm much happier than anybody I've ever met. How did I get to be this way, and what do I have that I can tell you about success in school? Because everybody tells us to succeed in school, but usually they don't look very happy. I mean, I remember when I was in high school, and I don't think I was the greatest student in the world. And I think that was my way of saying, this is who I am. I mean, I was just one of the kids who ended up in the principal's office a lot of the time. I had what they call a serious attitude problem. I think I still do. But I've learned to make my attitude problem work for me. And if you have anything going on in your life, you have an attitude problem too. Because I think what a serious attitude problem means is that you're an independent person. You're smart, and you're different from other people. You're not a clone. You want to be who you are. But I made a mistake when I was younger, or I don't know if it was a mistake, but it's just how I did it until I figured it out. My way of dealing with authority, school, you know, just all the establishment world that I saw, which didn't look very happy to me, was to not always study a lot. I just thought school was this thing you had to go do, and as soon as I got out of school at the end of the day, I felt free. I mean, it was a heavy, oppressive place. I went to an inner city high school, you know, real kind of a mixed bag of kids. And after I graduated from high school, I didn't go to college right away. I took a little time off. I traveled around the world. I did a lot of different things, climbed some mountains, you know, did some snowboarding, a lot of athletic things, worked a lot of different jobs. But then, as I was in the world for a while, and I traveled all over, and I saw people in different walks of life and having different experiences, I began to get a new take on life. Now, I did okay in high school. Don't misunderstand me. When I liked a subject, I would just throw myself into it. But if I didn't like a subject, I just didn't throw myself into it. I just would sit in class and think about the girl who was next to me, or, you know, I'd look out the window and do what I guess people call daydreaming. And when I was daydreaming, I was off doing something great. I mean, I remember sitting in high school looking out the window, and just, I knew that there was a better way to do things. I knew that sitting in class, I wasn't always that happy. And I'd go home and I'd have this stuff they call homework. And, you know, I had a lot of homework. I remember my homework. And it was always the last thing I wanted to do. I mean, unless there was a book I really liked reading, you know, a novel or something that assigned, but usually the stuff was really boring, if you know what I mean. So I'm 43 years old now, and I also have a PhD and a master's degree and a bachelor's degree, and I'm a member of Phi Beta Kappa, which is a very exclusive honorary society for people who do really well in school. So how did I get from sitting in high school, I think I did well in drama class, I liked that, you know, being in the plays was fun, and I loved being in the band, that was great. I was in the high school marching band. But how did I get from there to living in Malibu, California, home of the rich and famous? How did I get into MTV rock videos? How did I end up with my own computer business? Actually, I own 2 software development companies. Again, I was this spaced out kid, a dreamer, looking out the window. What happened was I learned about life, not really from my parents. I think they were trying to tell me, but I just didn't understand what they were saying. Not from society at large, because I wanted to be me. And somehow I felt that I was being put in a straitjacket by studying, by doing homework, and I was just going to end up like everybody I saw, and I certainly didn't want that to be my life. I mean, maybe it worked for them, but it wasn't for me. Well, I looked at life, and I got out and I worked a little bit. I worked at a lot of different jobs. I worked in factories, I fought forest fires for a while, I worked in restaurants. I did a lot of different things. I looked at people of all types, and I learned from them. And what I learned is that life is a system. It's a big economic system, and school has a lot to do with that system. What I learned was that if you really want to rebel, if you want to be really who you are, you need options in life. And there are 2 really important options. One option is money. Money is a very powerful tool, and we'll talk about it later. It's not good, it's not bad. Depends how you use it. And I'm not captivated by it, but at the same time, I recognize its importance. Another thing is just personal happiness. And it's amazing what school can do to make you feel great about yourself. Not just school, but doing well at something. So really, today we're talking about 2 things, money and personal happiness. And sometimes I know they don't seem like they go together. I know a lot of people think, well, gee, people who have a lot of money, they're really establishment, they're not creative, they've sold out. I never sold out. I never sold out. I just did well, and I can do what most people can never do, or at least they don't seem to do it. I can work anywhere I want in the world. I can do what I want to, when I want to, buy or not buy what I want to, and I have a good understanding of art, literature, mathematics, geography, computer science, and the world. I know a lot about people. I'm not a bigot, and I try and help people out whenever I can. But I'm also street smart. I know the street real well. I know it inside out and backward and forward. Like I said, I teach martial arts. What I came to understand was this. When you do well in school, what you're really doing is giving yourself an option. When you don't do well in school, when you just sit there and stare out the window, you can stare out the window if you listen, but when you don't do your homework, what you're doing is locking yourself into a very limited position in life. Meaning, the way the big world turns is M-O-N-E-Y, money. Not just the money that you make, but the choices that education gives you. When you have a good education, it's a ticket. Now, I just came back from England. I came back a couple days ago. I was doing some business in Europe. You know, I flew on the Concorde. Concorde's a great plane. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Most planes take about 6.5 hours to fly from London to New York. The Concorde is a supersonic jet, and it does it in 3.5 hours. And it's a small plane, really. I mean, it's very narrow. And I was sitting on that plane with people who run the world, people who run governments. That's who flies the Concorde. It's very expensive. People who run companies, you know, very, very successful people, and I'm successful too. It's because I applied myself in school. I realized that the only person I was screwing when I was rebelling against school was myself. I realized that if I really wanted to be independent, and I really wanted to be able to do anything I wanted to do, whether it was kick back, you know, go snowboarding up in the mountains, or anything, what I needed to do was to have freedom of choice. And I didn't design society. It's the way it is. But as I traveled from country to country when I was a teenager, when I went to the Far East and all over the world, you know what? I saw the same thing. I saw there are poor people who don't have a lot of education. There are people who are middle class, who have some education, and there are people in a higher class who have more education. That what education does is it provides you access. You get to choose what you want to do. You get to choose your job. If you don't have a lot of education, if you really don't do well in school, You may be hanging around with a lot of people who think they're hip, and they say, hey, that's not for me. But when you graduate from high school, you know what happens? Everybody goes their own way. And all those hip people you used to know, they end up washing dishes. They end up being waitresses and waiters. And I've done those things too. And there's nothing wrong with it, but it's no way to spend a whole lifetime. They end up not doing much. On the other hand, when you sit down at night and when you study, when you decide you want to get somewhere in life, you do. School is a fantastic thing. It really is exciting. It's wonderful to have a sense of accomplishment. Let me tell you a little bit more about my story, and then I think you'll understand. What I did was I went to college. And when I went to college, I don't think I was as prepared as some people were, because I'd fooled around a lot in high school. I really didn't know how to study. I really had to teach myself. So I would sit down at night and I learned how to study. And the first semester or two in school, I did okay. Then I started to get mostly A's. Then I got all A's. Then I never got anything but A's. Got a great scholarship, fellowships to graduate school. I put myself through school. My family didn't do it. But what I found as I started to study and I started to get all these A's or whatever was that I started to feel really good about myself. I started to feel most excellent about who I was. I didn't realize that what I was doing was negative. It was bad for me. By trying to be independent and say, hey, the heck with you, I'm not going to study because I'm an individual, all I was doing was locking myself in a closet, and there was no way out of it. Because the people who run the world and the system that runs the world depends upon education. And if you really want to make a statement, if you really want to show you're independent, if you really want to show that you've got something special, then you go succeed in school. And then you can make job choices. You can become a president. You can become a governor. You can become a rock star. You can do anything that you want to. Because school is a ticket, not just the diploma, but the fact that you learn how to learn. I run a software company. Now, there was a time I didn't know what a computer was. I have a PhD in English literature. I know a lot about literature, poetry, because that interested me at one time. Then I wrote a few books, and I was a famous author for a while, did a lot of television shows. But suddenly, at one point, I became interested in computers. I had a little office for some of my businesses, and we got a little computer, and it didn't work really well. The software wasn't very good. So I got interested in software, and I found that what I wanted for my office didn't exist. Well, I started to read books about it, and I designed a piece of software, and it was okay. It was fun. And pretty soon I knew a lot about software, and in a few years I was designing some of the most sophisticated software on the planet, artificial intelligence systems. The way I learned to do that was because in school I learned to study. Okay, now this is the important part. Listen up, America. What I learned was how to learn. What I learned by applying myself in school was how to learn a subject. I write rock and roll. I write classical music. I write all kinds of music. And the same skill set, meaning developing my mind to write music, to learn about computer science, to snowboard down a mountain, whatever it was, I learned that in school. I learned that by pushing as hard as I could and having fun with learning. I got excited about life, and I developed my mind. The point is not A's. The point is not a diploma. I mean, maybe that gets you into a job, okay. But if you're not excited about life and you're not excited about learning, once you get on the job, you're just going to be another person who's bored, hates their life, and can't wait to get out of a job, just like I used to feel about school. But when you get excited about learning, when you really love learning, when you get turned on to it, which you do when you study, and you find out that you can do it, and maybe you can get the best mark in the class, or if not, you can sure just learn a lot of interesting things. At that point, when you learn something very, very exciting, or when you just get a better take on what studying and knowledge is about, suddenly you begin to change. And I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. One of the most important things in life is self-image. And we get our self-image, our take on ourselves, really from what we do. When we avoid something, that is really good for us, or even if it's just something that we have to do but we don't like it and we don't throw ourselves into it, we actually get a very bad self-opinion. And that's the worst thing that can happen in life. Bad things can happen to you, but if you feel good about yourself, if you feel strong, if you have a strong and positive self-image, then you can deal with whatever happens in life. So we get a lot of our image from school, our self-image, how we do in school. Now, when I went to college, and again, I had not been a star-studded student in high school. I mean, that's putting it mildly, I think. But I got into college, and I went to the University of Connecticut. And I found the most interesting thing. I didn't realize that I had a bad take on myself, that I had a low self-image. When I started to do well in school, and I started to realize that my future was in my hands, and I was deciding it, and I was affirming my own life and my future by deciding to study, something great happened. I began to change. I started to really get into school. When I would go to school, I would listen to what the teachers were saying. And it became a fun game to see if I could pay such attention and listen with such intensity to what they say that I could anticipate where they were going to go next. But let me back up once again and talk a little bit about how you get to that point yourself, because this is not a video about me, it's about you. What I'm suggesting is that you can change your life. And the way you change your life is by rebelling. But what you don't want to rebel against is your future and your possible success and choices and options that you may have. You may have friends who are rebelling and they say, hey, I just don't want to do this. I'm just going to get stoned today, or just, I'm just not into school. And if that's how they feel, that's how they feel. But you have to feel differently, because your future is going to happen, and it's going to happen faster than you think. And your future can be great and creative and successful and wonderful, and you can have choices about what you do, where you spend your time, or you can be told what to do all your life by a boss, not make much money, not have many opportunities, not have choices. The key to success is learning. And what you're doing in school more than anything, no matter what the subject is you're learning how to study, how to look at something, understand it from different points of view. Let me give you an example. When I was at the University of Connecticut, I was really getting excited about school. I was doing very well, and gradually I was getting B's and A's and that sort of thing, because my self-image was changing. I would study a subject, I would do really well in it, and when I got to that point where I would normally kick back, I didn't. I'd study some more. I'd rewrite the essay another time or a third time. Now, you have to understand, school was not necessarily easy for me. I mean, there were other kids in the class who got things faster than I did. Now, you may have had that experience. You're sitting in class, and somebody is just picking up information. They just always seem to have the right answer. And after a while, you can begin to think that they're smarter than you. That's not true. School is like tennis, it's like basketball, it's like anything. With a little practice, you get better at it. And some people seem to pick it up a little more quickly. But if you persevere at something, you may end up better at it than a lot of other people did. Well, when I got into studying and started really enjoying, to be honest with you, school, and having fun with it, I didn't know it was so fun, because, I always saw these kind of straight kids doing it, and they never looked very happy. But when I started to do well with it, I started to read the books, not once, not twice, write the essays sometimes 4 or 5 times, just because I really wanted to see how far I could push it. I mean, could I nail it? Could I give this person what they wanted? It was a creative challenge. Then suddenly, I started to feel better about myself. I started to enjoy what I was doing. I started to feel really good about my life. But as I was saying, sometimes there are people who pick something up a little more quickly. And if you find that that's true, you have to be patient with yourself, because there were a lot of kids in school, when I was in school, when I started out in college, who were much faster on the uptake than I was. And it's just, as I said, like basketball. Maybe they'd practiced a little more than I had. But you know what? I ended up with a PhD, and most of them never went to graduate school. I ended up owning a couple of companies. I ended up on television all the time in rock videos. I did things they never did, even though they were a little bit faster than I was to start with, because I had more fun with it. I think most people, when they go to school, even though a lot of the people who do well with school, I don't think they enjoy it. I think they just do it because they're conforming or they're kind of scared, but I don't think they really like it. What I discovered is when you choose to do school really well for yourself, it's something that you've decided because you want options, and you're rebelling against the world and society and everyone, and that's your rebellion. Your rebellion is that you're going to do well for yourself, so you have choices. Then at that point, it becomes fun. There's energy in what you do. So I found that when I started to study, not because everybody else did, I didn't rewrite an essay because everyone else was. It was my idea, it was my invention, because I decided I wanted to get ahead, that it would be fun just to see what it was like. And I was curious if I could even do it. I mean, could I do as well, if not better than anybody else? It was a new idea for me. Because like I said, I was kind of a slacker at times in high school, you know? What I found out was that when I applied myself, I could smoke. I mean, I could really just go by most people in the class, because they were just doing it because they thought that's what you had to do in life. They weren't excited by it. And that's the secret to success in school, is that you will find that learning, no matter what it was or what it is, can be fun. So when I was in the University of Connecticut and I hit my first class that I absolutely didn't like, I had a history class, and I have to tell you, it was American history, it was required. And I had had it in high school and liked it. But this history teacher was boring. I mean, this guy should have been retired out of the system a long time ago. You've had teachers like that, you know what I'm saying? They are just collecting paychecks, and I don't want to raid on anybody's parade here, but there are people in the system who shouldn't be there. They've got tenure, I don't know why they took the job, but they're not exciting teachers. And it's like life. The question is, when you have a teacher who's not exciting, or a subject that's not exciting, or a job that's not exciting, and that happens in real life, can you make it exciting? So here I am in history class with this boring professor. I mean, this guy's reading from notes that he had been teaching from for 20 years. I mean, he was history. And that's what I was studying. So my normal reaction would have been at this point to say, hey, this is boring, this guy's not interested, I'm not interested, and I'm just not going to do well. You know, and I knew he didn't like me, I could tell. I mean, you've had that feeling once in a while, you just get a teacher who doesn't like you, who knows why, but I just knew that he didn't like me, maybe because I was a little different, okay? A little creative, my hair was a little longer, something. So what I decided to do was ace the class. I decided that I'm going to get an A in this class, because why not? Because that A will take me places. It'll get me into a better graduate school or a better job. And also, I was just curious to see if I could do it. I mean, why not? Just because a subject isn't interesting, at least the way it's being presented, doesn't mean it's not interesting. The reason, there's only one reason that you don't do well in school. You know what it is? The only reason you don't do well in school is because you've had bad teachers. I hate to say it, but there are a lot of people out there who do not make learning exciting. And if a teacher doesn't transmit it, if you're not excited by school, you've never had a really good teacher. Because a good teacher can make any subject exciting. But to have to rely on good teachers, well, that's not just going to happen. There are people in the system who just don't work, you know? I mean, they're just there, they're just collecting a paycheck. And what I realized was I wanted to get ahead. I wanted to have an exciting life. So what I would do when I would hit a boring subject or a boring teacher, well, I was confused. I realized that there are no boring subjects. Anything that you learn is challenging and exciting. What makes life exciting is when you put your best effort into it. When you ace something, when you try with all you have, it raises your energy level. It raises your self-image. You feel good. You know, whenever you walk away from a challenge, you feel bad about yourself. So what I did with history class and many classes thereafter, and many music projects and albums that we've done, and computer games and programs that I've written, and just, you know, in martial arts matches, and you name it, anything in life, I've learned to apply what I've learned in school. Every time I took a class, every time I wrote a paper, I learned something. I learned to adapt to a situation and to figure out how to win. I became a winner, and that was what was most exciting. What's exciting is when you hit a subject that you're not going to do well with, when you hit a teacher who just doesn't excite you, and then you say, wait a minute, I'm going to make this exciting. Why should I let this person slow down my progress in life? Just because they're not having a good time, just because they're not excited, doesn't mean I'm not going to be. So the trick in school or in life, I don't know if it's a trick, but if you want to be happy, because I'm happy and I can tell you, and I'm very successful. The trick in life is for you to take your life into your own hands. That's power. As long as you say, well, the teacher's not good, the system's not good, the city I live in isn't good, my parents aren't good, whatever it is, whenever you do that, you give away your power. You're saying somebody has control over you. If you let somebody push you out of the weight room, you go down to work out, and there are just a lot of big guys in there or big gals in there, and you're just starting and you get intimidated, then you let them get power over you. If you go down in the weight room and train, well, then pretty soon you may be stronger than them. You can't let people push you out of school. You can't let people intimidate you by saying, hey, I know more. They just put that out. You can't let courses that you have to take that you might not be fascinated by, or teachers who slow you down a little bit, slow you down. Now, sometimes I do a piece of music. I just wrote some music for a show that's coming on TV shortly, and it's a situation comedy. Now, I like to do a lot of rock personally, but this particular comedy required a different type of music. And I had the opportunity to do the show. The producer's very famous, probably the most famous producer in the world. And I got the chance to do the music, and it's competitive. You know, in Hollywood, I mean, a lot of people are trying for the job. It's like trying to get A's in school, okay? So what I did was I took a type of music that didn't fascinate me, and I said, I can do this better than anybody else in Hollywood. I can get this show. This was the attitude I got writing papers in school, doing math problems, and working with classes that didn't excite me, and schoolrooms that weren't attractive, and people around me who were not motivated. I separated myself from the pack. That's what being an individual means. And I said, I'm alive for me. I want to succeed. Today I'm very fortunate because I get to teach people a lot of different things. Hopefully I'm taking some of what I've learned and my success and giving it to you today and saying, don't be a dropout. As a matter of fact, don't even be mediocre. Be a success. Dare to be different. Have fun with school, have fun with life. But what you don't know is that every time you write a paper, every time you do a homework assignment, every time you sit in class in the front row instead of the back, and I'll tell you why I do that in just a minute, you're making a statement that your life is worthwhile and no one has power over you. Anybody who can turn you off to your future and school is not doing you a favor. And if you really want to win, and if you want to rebel, I'll tell you how you do it. You do it the way I did it. You get yourself in a position in life where you call the shots. And that's where I am. I call the shots in my life. I do everything on my schedule. And yet at the same time, I still take challenging assignments and challenging moments that might be difficult or boring, and I turn them into fun. And we're going to talk about how you do that in just a second. To be honest with you, the secret of life, the secret of success, the secret of being happy is making something exciting. You will find that by and large, most people are bored with their lives. Kids don't like school, people don't like the people they marry very frequently, people don't like their jobs, sometimes they don't even like their vacations. And it's because they expect that everything should just always work out and be wonderful, and everything is supposed to be a situation comedy like on television. Well, real life isn't like that. Real life is very tough, very adversarial. And if you don't have your act together, then you don't do well in life. Having your act together means two things. Having your act together means that you can turn a situation that would not be challenging or exciting into an exciting situation. And having your act together also means that you have learned that the secret of life is really being excited, and that excitement isn't something that comes from outside, it's something that you pull up from within yourself. Let me give you a very simple example. When I was, and maybe you've had this experience, when I was in school, and I was in school a long time, and not just 12 years of high school, but remember I went to college for 4 years for a bachelor's degree. I did a master's in 1 year and a PhD in 4, which is pretty fast, by the way. So I've been in school a long time. I've sat in a lot of classes. I've had great teachers, and as I said before, some that weren't so great. But I learned a simple trick, and it's real interesting and it's real indicative of where we are at with a process that we go through in life. In this case, it was school. I always used to sit in the back of the classroom when I didn't like a class. And as a matter of fact, in high school, I used to spend a lot of time in the back of the class, as far away as I could get from the professor. And then, when I started to get more interested in school, and really more interested in myself and how I could develop and who I could be, I changed that pattern, and I'd like you to try it. Next time you go to class, next time you're in school, try this experiment. Instead of sitting in the back, try going to the front of the class. Sit in one of the front rows. Because you're making a statement about how you feel about your education, your life, and who you are. When you sit in the back all of the time, you're saying, in effect, that I want to get out of here. This is not of interest to me. When you sit in the front, you'll be much more awake, and you're drawing the material into yourself. Certainly, there's sometimes it's fun to move around and sit in different areas of a classroom. But it's an interesting thing. You'll find most good students, not all, tend to sit in the front. Our body language is expressing our interest in something. You can use that to your advantage. Try an experiment, sit in one of the front rows in some of your classes, sit in the back rows. Notice if you're more alert in the front, well, you know the teacher's looking right at you, so you can't exactly fall asleep. But you also are expressing interest, and it's nice for a teacher. You know, a teacher's job is not easy. Now, I've been a teacher for some time, and I was a college teacher, and I also taught some classes in remedial English in some inner city schools at one time. I've worked with a lot of kids. And there are certainly teachers in the system, as I said before, who are just collecting a salary check, and that should be changed. We have to really restructure our educational system. I think we're all aware of that now. But there are also teachers who are really good teachers, and in spite of low pay, problems with violence in schools, and kids are just, you know, are kind of turned off to learning, and I don't blame the kids for that. I know what that's all about. But still, they come in every day, and they do their very best to present subject material that maybe they've gone over 50 times. And some people really do make it exciting. And you pay a compliment to a teacher when you sit up front and you're interested. You're saying, in effect, I respect you. And they're saying, in effect, I respect you. They're doing a good job, hopefully teaching, and you're saying, I'm interested in this. You don't know what it's like as a teacher to be up front and see somebody in the back, and you came all the way to teach them something, and they're just, you know, not interested at all. It's kind of insulting in a way. Some teachers, granted, are boring, as I said before. Your challenge in life, not just with school, your challenge with life itself is to turn situations that otherwise might be negative into positives for yourself. Isn't that what success really is? So I began sitting up in the front of the class, not only in classes that I enjoyed, but in classes that I wasn't crazy about, and I found it made a real difference. It got me into the process. Needless to say, if you want to succeed in school, it takes a little more than just sitting in the front rows. You've got to learn how to study, how to budget your time, what to do when you're not feeling good. How do you deal with school when you're just having a tough day? What do you do when you have an upsetting situation in your life? You're going out with somebody, you break up with them, you're worried, and you just don't feel like studying, but you really need to. There are different ways to address different subjects. Needless to say, you study math one way, foreign language another way, English another way. So I'd like to talk for a few minutes with you about some of the different ways, shortcuts that you can use. Now I think I have you interested, I hope, because I'm interested. I'm interested in exciting you about school. Well, not really about school. I'm interested in exciting you about your future. Your future can be great, difficult, life is tough, but great. And the place we set the pattern for our future success in life is school. And school is a great place because it isn't really about teachers, and it isn't really about books or even computers. It's about you waking up and finding out how exciting and fascinating life is. And that's a place where we learn basic skill sets so that we can go out and be successful and have different choices in life. But what school is really about is you're exploring the world. When you read a book, when you learn to solve an algebra problem, when you learn a foreign language, which is really useful, by the way, when you go to Europe a lot like I do, or the Orient, what you're doing is expanding your mental horizon. Suddenly, instead of just being the person you were, you've added something exciting. It's like in martial arts when we learn a new kick or a new block or a new punch. I mean, we may be able to knock somebody down or defend ourselves, but after a while, even that gets boring. I mean, you want to keep learning new things. That's what makes life exciting. When you see somebody who's bored in life, it's because they're not learning. Sometimes you see somebody in their 70s and 80s and they're really young still. That's because they're learning. If you examine their life, you'll find they're exciting. Well, we set a pattern in school, and a lot of it has to do with how we budget our time. Now, I'm assuming you're with me, okay? We're tight. You know, as well as I do, that your success matters. You can say it doesn't matter and you don't care, but let me tell you, you care, right? You care about your future. You care about how you feel. And if you don't, you know, go look yourself in the mirror and have a talk with yourself, okay? Don't get depressed just because other people are. Life can be tough, but boy, can it be rewarding. It can be exciting. But you're going to make it that way. You're going to make a difference. I don't know about for the whole world, but you can make a difference for yourself and sometimes for a couple of other people. So one of the first things you have to learn to do to be very successful in school is to budget your time correctly. You need to learn to set enough time aside to study. I mean, obviously you have to get to school on time and not be so tired that you can't be awake and pay attention and take notes when you need to. But what you really need to do is study. Most of what you learn in school, particularly college, is not learned in the classroom. You know, the teacher talks, you listen, but it's mostly what we do at home. And that's when you really get into budgeting your time. There are two aspects to budgeting time. One is how much time you give to each subject, and the other is what you study. I have to tell you a story. I used to be in, well, it's a different history class. I had a lot of history classes. And there was this gal in college who used to sit next to me, and she always got the best marks in the class. You know, when we first started, she always would ace everything. And she spent hours and hours and hours studying. Well, pretty soon, I used to, and I suggested, meet and become friendly with the people who did really well in every class. It was kind of fun, you know, because if they're doing well and you're doing well and you spend time together, it becomes a challenge for both of you. If you start to spend time with people in school who are successful, it kind of rubs off and your success rubs off on them. Anyway, I was sitting next to this gal. We used to sit next to each other, and she always got A-minuses all the time. Once in a while she'd get an A, and this was a tough class. And I decided that I wanted to, you know, go one better. I wanted to get an A, not an A-minus. And she used to study for hours. I mean, I'm telling you, I just didn't have it in me. Suddenly I was getting A's and she was getting A-minuses, and she didn't understand it. And she would study everything for 10 hours, 12 hours, 15 hours. You know, I'd study for maybe 6 or 7 hours. Finally, one day she had to turn to me and she said, "How do you do it? How can you, in less time than I, get a better grade?" And I said, "Well, you know, I listen very carefully to what the teacher talks about, and I can anticipate the questions he's going to ask on the test. I know pretty much how he wants a paper written." You see, success in life has to do with information, and it has to do with understanding what information is required of you. If a test is on a particular subject, it's biology, and you know or you have a sense of what questions are going to be asked, that's the material you study. You may read other material just because it's interesting and you like learning it, but in order to complete an assignment correctly, you really have to know or anticipate what's going to be asked of you. It's the same on a job. It's the same in anything in life. If you're prepared, if you have a sense of what's coming towards you, if you're ready for it, then you'll do very well with it. So what I learned about school was this. I learned that listening to the teacher was one of the most important things, because I could anticipate the direction in which the teacher wanted the student to go, wanted me to go. And if you listen to, even in their voice tones when they talk, you could hear about subject material that would be exciting to them. And I'd pay particular attention to that subject material, along with everything else, when I studied. And I usually would get A's. Budgeting time means that you only have 24 hours in a day. And you have to sleep a certain amount, and there are other things that you have to do, and you have to go to school, and sometimes you have to work and go to school. I did that. I put myself through college and graduate school. So the way you budget time is not simply to say, I'm going to take an hour to study French, an hour to study algebra, an hour to study, trigonometry, whatever it is. The way you budget time is you use your time more effectively, because you could study every subject for 3 or 4 hours and still not do well in school. I mean, you'd probably do okay. So the same is true of life. In life, sometimes people just waste a lot of time. We see it in the music business. You can go into a studio to shoot a rock video, and you can run off a lot of tape, make a lot of mistakes, and it costs a lot more money to shoot the video. It's not cost effective. We can go into a studio, we can put down an album in a short period of time. It's being prepared. It's being ready. So essentially, the way you succeed at school is you need to anticipate what it is that the teacher wants you to learn. What is required of you? You might want to surpass it. You might want to learn new things, but bottom line, you need to anticipate what someone wants. And you do that by studying their mind. Now this may not seem like a big deal, but I'm telling you, I was a straight A student. I'm in Phi Beta Kappa. The secret is listening to what people want, anticipating it. And when you listen in class very attentively, and you're very aware, not just of what the person is saying, but how they're saying it, you'll anticipate what to study. Then you can go and study that material. And if you still don't do real well on the test, you know what you do? You walk up to the teacher after class, very politely, and you say, I really tried hard to pass this test or to get an A or a B or whatever it was you were doing that day. But in spite of the fact that I really tried, I missed it. Could you please take a few minutes and show me where I went wrong here? You have no idea how frequently teachers wish they were asked more questions like that. Teachers like teaching by and large. That's why they're in the job. And it's a compliment to a teacher. They don't consider it insulting when you ask them for a little extra help. Now, you're not asking them to do your work for you. You've got to do your work. But if you've really tried with a subject and you've just had trouble with it, then you simply don't know what's expected of you. It's really not any deeper than that. So budgeting time, managing time in school, essentially means that you have anticipated what is expected of you. You listen in class. When you have difficulty, you ask the teacher, say, I read all this material and it wasn't even on the test. I wrote this paper several times, and I guess I really don't know. Could you please take a moment and explain to me what it is that I should do? What are you looking for? And 99 out of 100 times, the teacher will explain it to you. And then you'll be able to go through the next material and do very well in the next test or exam. In school and in life, you have to have a sense of balance. We learn that in martial arts. In martial arts, if your balance is really good, almost no one can knock you down. So balance means, in life, being able to deal with upsetting situations and circumstances that come along in life. Sometimes we get very upset emotionally. Sometimes there are problems at home. Sometimes just, we broke up with somebody. I mean, there are a lot of variations. And very often, one of the ways that we react to a difficult situation when we're in school is we stop studying. We stop working. We just get so down, so depressed, so frustrated that we say, I'm not even going to try. When you do this, you make a mistake. Because when you're not feeling good, if you want to make yourself feel even worse, don't do well at something. The way you pick yourself back up is to achieve. If, let's say, for example, your girlfriend just broke up with you or your boyfriend, and you're feeling really bad, you can lose yourself in your studying. You can lose the pain and the frustration of any experience in schoolwork. It's the greatest thing. And later, when you're out of school, you can do the same thing, reading books or creating projects or studying new material, just taking up a subject on your own. I've gone through a lot of painful experiences in my life, and I'm sure you've had your share, and there are more ahead along with good ones. But one of the greatest things about school is that you can take your mind into a book, into a project, and you can lose it in there. You can just study something and have an adventure in learning.